Blood, having trained more than 24,000 vets, helping you and your fur babies thrive. Live in studio with Will Bangura, answering your pet behavior and training questions. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome your host and favorite pet behavior expert, Will Bangura.
Would you like to go on, Mickey?
Y'all ready for this?
Good day, dog lovers. Why is that still there? I don't want that there. It's in the picture. There we go. That's better. Welcome, dog lovers. I'm Will Bangura. Hey, thanks for joining us for a impromptu episode of Dog Training today. Got my good friend with me, Roman Gottfried, who I met, was it last fall at the Pet Professional Guild conference that we had here in Scottsdale. Roman is a holistic trauma-informed dog behavior consultant. He has over 25 years of hands-on experience. He's worked with thousands of dogs, especially guardian breeds and rescues. He really focuses on the emotional root of behavior, not just the surface. His approach is grounded in humane, relationship-based care. No shock, no force, no gimmicks, as he says. Roman works with clients all around the world through virtual consultations as well as online education, helping dogs and their families reconnect, recover, and move forward together. And you can learn more. We'll give out his web address again a little bit later, but you can learn more about Roman, and you can learn more about Roman's dog training business and what he offers at holisticdogtraining.org. That's holisticdogtraining.org. But Roman, thank you for being here. I appreciate you taking your time out to talk with us today.
Will, it is my pleasure to meeting you again. And yes, it was in Phoenix, Arizona with a PPG event. And yeah, I wish I had more time then, hang around and have one-on-one chat since I used to live in Phoenix, but we missed that part. So
you
yep,
used to
I'm
live
now
in
in
Phoenix?
Eugene, Oregon. Yeah, I used to live in Phoenix.
I didn't realize that. Maybe you said that
2000
back then, and I didn't realize that.
Yep.
How
I didn't
long
think
ago were you in Phoenix?
we left 2018,
Okay.
19. I moved from Austin, Texas to Phoenix, and then we finally end up here in Eugene, Oregon.
Okay. And how long have you been in Eugene?
Yep, since 2019.
Okay. So you went straight from here to there, been there
Yeah,
since.
a little bit
Okay.
RV life in between, and
Nice.
yeah, until I found finally a place to settle.
Okay. Very good. Well, listen, let us know a little bit about you. Talk about how you got involved in dog training, first of all. And you've got quite a journey. You've got quite a story. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, thank you for asking. I give you just a heads up, ADD brain here. So if I get a
That's
bit off track, bring the squirrel back to the tree.
okay.
So yeah, I'm one of those people who kind of, as usual, grew up with dogs ish. I remember my first dog was Rex, a German Shepherd. We found on the street, stray in Greece, and I used to live in Greece back then. And yeah, I was 4 back then, and from there I kind of got very close to that dog because of my parent relationship and their divorce going on. So for me, the dog was kind of an anchor in my life in that early stage. Then my then divorced parents, and one part of my parents moved to Iraq, and so obviously had to follow. I didn't have a choice on that, and I ended up again with dogs. In that case, it was the Iraqi local Saluki dogs, and then my first experience happened there with losing a dog in my care. I was 6 back then. So somebody opened the gate on our property and the dog ran out, and I didn't have no tools to get the dog back. I was just a child, and the dog got hit by a car. And so I was
Oh
alone in the
no.
house back then. In the 70s, it wasn't like common that people would have the kids with some pet sitters or stuff like that. So I was holding my dog dying in my hands in the streets of Iraq, in Kirkuk, actually, to be more precise. And that was a very traumatic experience because not only I was blamed for losing the dog, and I wasn't able to help. So I felt helpless. I felt responsible for my dog's death. And that actually kind of carved a need to me control. The more control of a dog, the better it is. But also, it came to me to the idea that if I would know more, I would do better. So it was a combination of learn more, do better, control as much as you can so you don't end up in a mess again. And it was later on, and I don't want to go all this trauma line. Um, One of our dogs got left outside from my father, and the dog died because of, again, bad parenting. So then all these things came to my mind. I need to be a better dog parent. I shouldn't be like my father and stuff like that. And in the end, many years later, after graduating engineering school in Austria as industrial engineer, I was more into the engineer mind, doing things, fixing things, system integration, robotics, and stuff like that later on. And I did not have any time for dogs. However, because I was very busy all day long with work, I adopted street dogs in Greece. So I started working with street dogs, feeding them, making sure they care, because in Greece we don't have that animal protection back then that was now. So I was very busy after work on my way home to care for those dogs, and I observed dogs. Usually, most of them were strays or dumb dogs. Some of them we could consider feralish because they may not live in houses. They seen people, but from distance. So it was very interesting to observe behaviors and how they interact in the environment. Um, and then I started getting more and more involved with that until in the Olympic Games 2004, where all our dogs disappeared and the government, took everything out. It was really a burnout for me. And I said, I'm done with dog things, and kind of pulled away from it. In 2006, I moved to US, and with my immigration process, things went a little bit sideways. And then I was forced to stay at home and wait for my immigration papers to come in and stuff like that. So I did pet sitting. And then one thing led to another. People soon enough figure out that there's something going on with this guy. Um, but there was a little problem there because in US everything has to be accordingly. You need insurance and stuff like that. I was like, I need to read a little bit more about that. So I started grabbing some books and started reading things, and had to pass a test and get graduated as a dog trainer. But one thing that was important here is that I started the wrong foot. I followed wrong directions. I bought the wrong books. I watched the wrong TV stations. And even though I had good hand and good feelings and guts feelings and intuition on dog training, I literally had to dump that because I had to follow rules, which in that case, most of those books that I had was aversive. Shock collars were already included, and prong collars and choke collars, but that's what you do, right? If you have big dogs, and if you're not a dog trainer, right, you have to be a dog trainer. You have to use the tools, otherwise you're a little trainer. But I want to be a big trainer, so I had big dogs, so I had to be big tools. And it was kind of like this cliche and formed around the idea of what a good trainer would look like and what a good trainer would do. And even though it was against intuition, I didn't feel good about it. I tried to confirm it, try to justify it. Well, I'm using those tools because they're better, and there must be some proof out there. Okay, books are books, but there must be science behind that. So I started digging deeper into that. And I would say in the meantime, I was pretty good in my mindset dealing with aggressive dogs. I got a lot of aggressive dogs over the period of time. Shelters sent the dogs to me. I got invited to shows. I got invited to adopting dogs who are on kill list in New York shelters and in Long Island shelters. And local rescue would reach out to me. Large breed rescue reach out to me. That would send me their dogs before they're going to adoption. And so I was pretty handy with those tools, I would say. but still, I wanted to do better, and I wanted to do better, and I wanted to do better. And every time I find a handicap and I found a problem and there are obstacles to overcome, I try to find a solution out of it. And the more I was digging into that, the more I recognized that what I was doing was actually wrong. Trying to justify the shock collar ended up proving myself unjustifiable using a shock collar. There is no reason to use pain and fear and intimidation to get the dog to behave. And then the question was my side, why would I have such need of control? I know this trauma came to surface. Well, why do I need to control? Why is control the only way to heal? Right? And then the healing aspect kick in. So in 2011, I started already shifting over in transitioning into a holistic approach. I was very lucky to meet people who supported me in that mind shifting change without blaming me, without kicking my ass a little bit, but just gentle. So I started integrating food into behavior intervention. I started learning from my own trauma recovery that trauma is more complex than a dog behaving. Just like with people, people don't behave just because they behave. They behave because the environmental factors, their feelings, their emotions, their triggers, and all these things come together, including food. So I started adding things together. So if I said, if I have a dog, how would it look like if I put this information down to the dog? What is the easiest way to start feeding? Every time I feed, where you feed healthier, less hangriness will gonna happen. The dog will feel calmer. The dog will feel satisfied, and which means the dog also will be calmer because I have ADD and I was diagnosed with ADD. And the first thing the doctor said, eat healthier. The more crap you eat, the more crap you feel. And I'm like, let's put that in there. Let's check it out. So the more I digged into that, the more I saw results. I got to the point that I had a 28-day turnaround time on a dog who was euthanasia listed in New York
Mm.
shelter. And I'm like, wait a minute. So if that is consistent, then I don't need those tools because I had dogs that didn't do anything to those tools. You dial up to 120% and the dog didn't even flinch. Why is that? If those tools do all the magic, where's the magic? The magic got lost. And so I actually demystified my own tools and I don't need them anymore. And yes, I always had to go through a process of regretting making a change and being scared, being blamed, self blame, feel guilt, shame, because I have to change my website, I have to change my Facebook post, I had to change a lot. And people like, wait a minute, you were this tough guy, and now you're this. Are you driving a Prius now, or are you vegetarian? And I'm like, no, don't you see? I mean, it's obvious, right? I was blind back then, but now I see kind of thing. And now
Yeah.
everything pisses me off because, why don't you see that you just did? It's actually doing harm. And I noticed that me back then had to justify all those tools to satisfy my need to control. It wasn't really to help the dog. In my first mind was like, yeah, of course you help the dog, but in reality it's about control. The more control, the better it is for me because I get better clients. If I get better clients, I get more money. If I get more money, I can help more dogs. But it was a wrong vicious circle, and I had to get myself out of it. It was a incomplete survival response. Let's call it this way. And how do you get out of that? Is to actually observe what's happening, be able to zoom out of it. And as my first dog that actually did that transformation was a dog named Ziggy, a three-legged pit, who was on a kill list in Long Island. And I had a good name on working on guarding breeds, pit bulls and stuff like that. And that was the first challenge because the first time I was actually fundraised to deal with that dog using my new 20-day approach. And everybody was looking at my hands and I had to do live posts. And I'm like, I cannot screw that up. A, I said I'm not using those tools. B, this guy was a tough one. You moved your leg 30 feet away, he's going to attack you just for moving your leg from right to left. It was a trigger. Anything was a trigger. I remember having him in the crate, and he would attack me any moment I opened the gate. It was like a thing. And like, how can I do that? How can I fix that? It wasn't impossible. So yeah, in the beginning, I was trying to do my old tools because obviously there must be a reason for it. Aggression has to be dealt with aggression mindset, my fallback, and then that dog wouldn't flinch. But then I noticed one little detail that really popped out. The first thing was, hey, is this happening here? Did I get this feeling that is sending me a message? It was very discreet. It was like somebody blows a cold air on your neck. It was an emotional feedback. It wasn't a visual feedback because basically it was frozen in there. It was just sitting there staring at me, staring me down, and I was kind of staring him back down, like that's what we do, kind of thing. But that one was an emotional feedback. And every time I had this feeling, a second later, I would have this attack happening. And I'm like, maybe that's a cue. So I set up, somebody donated a GoPro. So I set up my GoPro and recorded it, and I played it back again and again. And I noticed it has a little time frame from the moment I moved my finger so I have a little bit feedback as possible so I'm not triggering anything. So I could capture whenever I felt it, have it on camera, and then at the dog attack. And that was about a second. So I said, if I would respond differently on that feedback, maybe that'll make a difference. So I got myself those little long sausages you can get on the store for dog treats. They look like the size of a pencil. And so every time I had this feeling of this breath, this cold breath, I was sticking him one of those dog treats through the kennel. And guess what happened? There was no attack. And I'm like, wait a minute. Am I rewarding aggression here? Like everybody would say?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, watch the video again. And I noticed that he changed his position from his staring it down. It was like, hey, wait a minute. You're not one of those. You changed. So you changed, I change. So here's the thing. I send you the message that I would do if you do it to me. But if you change, I change my behavior as well. And guess what happened? I stopped getting attacks because I rewarded what he was asking me about. I'm telling you, I don't feel well, and you reward me for that. I didn't reward the attack, I reward the feedback. And that was the moment I was like, holy beep here. I think I got through to it. That dog was really done in 28 days. And it was ready
Amazing.
for adoption. But here's why I didn't adopt him out. I was scared. I was scared that my system would not work. And what if some other was with it? What if somebody would go back to those tools and doesn't follow through with my suggestions because they seem so out of this world? Food is healthy and relationship is important, and reading your dog's cues is important. Don't punish behavior. Listen to it because it's a message. Who would trust me who changed recently? So I said, maybe I should keep him safe. It became a holy grail. And I learned so much from Ziggy. He lived to the end. He had cancer at the end. And so I had to let him go. But he was such an emotional, intelligent dog. And it totally shifted my mindset what dogs are capable of doing. From being the killer, as a 7-year-old puppy, he was fed through a drawer in a kennel run and never seen outside, to being a dog who you can carry on your shoulders because he had only 3 legs and it's difficult to walk on the beach, going around and I'm the cool guy kind of dog, and being together with children and other dogs and pets. I didn't try him with cats; he was a terrier.
Mm-hmm.
But he ended up being my biggest teacher. And when I started creating holistic dog training, that was the idea behind that. So from holistic pet care into holistic dog training, and then holistic Roman followed. Because I was in the beginning, I had the ideas of shifting and improving, but I didn't leave it. I had to grow out of my old wounds. So that was my transition from aversive training into holistic training.
And when you were doing training that was where you used aversive tools or aversive methods and such, how were you? Did you hang out with other trainers? Did you network with other trainers that were doing the same thing at that time?
I would follow trainers. I was very local bonded because I didn't have my papers yet, so I was kind of homebound, sort of.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I wasn't able to travel. But I followed a couple of back then important trainers and important groups of trainers and important companies who supported trainers. I don't go down naming them at that
Yeah.
point. Um, and I purchased products from those companies, and I was like, "Oh, these are the good guys. They know things because they have these videos and tours and tutorials, and yeah, they make sense because the way I perceived it made sense. Now, if I watch them, it doesn't make any sense.
Mm-hmm.
It makes actually exactly opposite. Um, and one person that really helped me shift out of it and trust my guts because I had these feelings about things and
Mm-hmm.
I had somebody to talk to and I couldn't to talk to anyone because I was being called nuts and woo woo trainer. I called a colleague back then and I tell him, this is this feeling. I know you're coming from a family with years of working with government contracts and dog training and stuff like that, and you're like third generation trainer in that kind of principles. What do you feel about that? And it's like, you're up to something. I had these feelings too. So yeah, keep digging in there. I think you're on the spot. And he was very difficult to read. I read a couple of his books. Man, you need kind of a PhD in reading to get through those books. But I understood where he's coming from in his transition from where he was and grew up with those belief systems into seeing energies and working with energies, what he perceived as such, and the whole thing helped me transition to that level. So I had a foundation to step on when I started moving that connection and changing. But I didn't have physical contact with trainers. I observed them, how they did work. I didn't like what I was looking at, and then I noticed that what I was didn't like watching also did myself. I basically they mirrored what I had to change, which I appreciate afterwards. So, do I regret going that route? I do, but I also believe if I didn't go that route, I wouldn't know what I know now, and I wouldn't change what I have changed so far. But I would not do it again if I could. But it's an experience. It's an experience that is of value, and I think I do have enough information, enough experience to help those people transition as well because I understand how they think and which traps they fall into. Because I believe all these people who do those things and use those tools are not bad people. Very rare to see people who actually enjoy hurting animals, and these are people are sick. But
Mm-hmm.
the rest just want to do better. And the tools they have is what they think is the best thing to do until they discover a new tool. And I compare it with people who know how to pour concrete, so everything has to be made of concrete. And then you meet another person who knows how to work with wood, and now everybody wants to work with wood. So we're going through those periods of times where we learn tools to handle until we'll stop using those absolute only tools and then see a more holistic approach. Well, you can use concrete, but you don't have to pour concrete everything. You can use wood, but you don't have to wood everything. But here's the thing: when it comes down to aversive tools, these are not tools that you should use because they are not foundational tools.
You
They
know,
are tools to control.
you've said that you've used control. And yeah, they definitely are tools to control. You know what struck me, and this is more from a personal level. You talked about growing up young. You talked about being 6. You talked about having a family coming from divorce. That kind of craziness. And similar to my background in terms of, I grew up with dogs, just pet dogs. And my parents, when I was really young, their marriage was messed up. It was crazy. It was insanity. And I remember, and I used to joke about it, that I was babysat by dogs. Okay. But my parents didn't have time for me. They were too busy with their chaos and their insanity. And it was me and the dog. And the one thing that my dad made a little time for, that I was a little bit a part of, was he was involved with German Shepherds and training at the local AKC dog training club in Milwaukee for German Shepherds, because we had German Shepherds. It was a breed specific AKC dog training club. And every Wednesday night we would go to this big old hall in the back of a bar. They had this big old hall in Milwaukee, where I'm from originally. And we would train German Shepherds. And back then and this is mid 70s, and back then everything was the Keeler method, Bill Keeler. Everything was choke chains. We weren't even using prong collars back then. We were just giving some really, really painful, really wicked choke chain corrections, because what I remember from that was that if you gave a leash and collar correction, if the dog didn't yelp, you didn't do it right. Okay. And there was no food. I don't remember even praising the dog. If there was, I just don't remember it. I remember the corrections. I remember all the harsh leash work. I remember the harsh things you did to dogs behaviorally. And, like, for example, in Keeler's book, and I know we did it to our dogs. I watched my dad do it. If they dug a hole, you filled up that hole with water, and you shoved the dog's nose in that hole of water and scared the hell out of it, making it feel like it was being waterboarded, that it was going to drown. Okay. But I never questioned any of it, because here I'm a kid and my dad's doing it and I'm watching all these other adults do it. And I'm lucky enough because I'm just a kid. And there's no other kids around, and there's all these adults around, but they're letting me do what the big people are doing. And I remember, as I got more and more into training dogs, because that was geared towards competition and competing in AKC obedience matches. And I remember the power and the control that I felt being able to dominate that dog. Now, I didn't use the words power, control, or dominate, but as a kid, that for the most part felt like there was really nothing that I was anchored to in life, because my family life was pretty chaotic. Yeah, everything I needed was taken care of. All the physical needs were taken care of, but emotionally, the needs weren't being met there. And so I remember that being able to get the dog to respond to me being able to control that dog, gave me a sense of power, gave me a sense of accomplishment. But I think that control, you keep talking about that control, being able, this is the one thing, there was so much in my life that I couldn't control, but that was one thing that I could control. And I remember that when the dog would try to fight me back, adding more pressure. Okay, adding more pressure. And the way that made me feel very powerful, very in control. just the magic of being able to have the power to make a dog respond to what I'm asking it to do. If I said sit and making that dog sit, if I said lay down and making that dog lie down, sending the dog out to fetch something and bring it back. The immense power that I felt with that. But back then, that's the way you train dogs. And it was incredibly heavy-handed. And then, years later, this is back in the very early 90s, I started training dogs professionally and working for a guy by the name of Andy Looper. I don't even know if Andy's around anymore. If he is, he's pretty old, but at Greater Phoenix Dog Training Academy here in Phoenix. And he had a little bit softer method, only from the standpoint that rather than a metal choke chain, it was a nylon choker. Okay. And he used verbal praise. And I remember learning from him tonality. Okay. And using a verbal tone, which it never had a verbal tone. Everything was harsh. Okay. And he also did personal protection dogs. And that's where I got involved in that. And a little bit before that, even though I didn't do it because I was a young kid, but my dad was starting to get into Schutzhund. Back then it was called Schutzhund still. And doing protection sports. But I remember working for Andy, and I remember that when it came to training those personal protection dogs, it was all about putting them on defense, all about pissing them off, all about causing them pain. We'd flank them and get them pissed off, and they'd be in pain, and they were, very defensive. And I remember that there too, that feeling of power, that feeling of control, because I'm getting this dog to bite and do bite work. And none of it was done as prey drive or fun or sport or anything like that. This was literally, we were training junkyard guard dogs is what I call it. Okay. Because it was just all force and getting them all pissed off. But I remember that sense of power and control that gave me. Later on down the road, interestingly enough, this might seem odd to some people, I don't know, but when I got introduced to using electronic collars in dog training, well, really, I had two introductions to it. One was in the mid-70s. We had a German Shepherd by the name of Max, and Max liked to run away. Max would run all the time. And so everything and anything my dad did, which was really nothing now that I think about it, really didn't do anything to try to fix the dog from running away. The one trainer friend of my dad's who was into breeding German Shepherds and Schutzhund said, here, use an electronic collar. And it was one of these old electronic collars where, gosh, the remote was like my
coffee cup,
coffee thermos here. It was this huge canister, okay, with a big metal antenna like on the old walkie-talkies, It was probably a old, probably Tritronics collar. And the dog took off running. And my dad's got the canister in his hand. And he hits the button. And what I remember is the Shepherd, Max, jumping up in the air, which to me seemed like he jumped up 20 feet in the air. Maybe it wasn't that high, but back then, I think it was maybe 8. I remember this dog just leaping into the air and hearing this horrific screech and this yelp. And rather than Max coming running home, Max goes and runs away further. Okay. It made the problem worse because Max didn't know why he was being punished, and he's scared to death, experiencing a lot of pain. He takes off running. So that was my first experience with electronic collar. Well, I got introduced by a friend of mine who was also in training. And at the time when I'm just doing leash and collar correction based training, to somebody who's using electronic collar. He says, hey, you should check this out. And the first thing that comes to my mind is my experience with my dad and Max, and that version of what electronic collars are doing, harsh, heavy punishment. And I'm like, no, I'm not interested. Why would I want an electronic collar? Why would I want to do any kind of electronic collar training? He goes, no, you got to check it out. You got to check it out. So I go to one of these group classes, and there's maybe 10, 12 dogs out there. They all have electronic collars on it. And for the most part, I'm looking at these dogs. They're not screaming like Max was. They're not yelping. They're not jumping up. They're not trying to run away. And these dogs are pretty well behaved, and they're responding pretty well. And the only thing that got my attention was the dogs aren't yelping. The dogs aren't yelping, which is what I expected with an electronic collar. And so that was the first time that I got introduced to the idea of low stim e-collar work, so to speak. Now, for those people that might not know what I'm talking about, with electronic collars, granted, you can adjust them. You can set it up really high and really hit the dog hard, and they can yelp and cry and all that good stuff too. But you can also set them lower where you're just causing enough discomfort, just causing enough pain, enough fear, enough intimidation where the dog's not yelping, okay, but the dog's working because it wants to shut off that pain. And for me, it seems funny even talking about it now, because I don't talk much about my story. I'm usually talking about other people's stories. But then for me, it was like, wow, this is because I had moved from a choker to prong collars. Okay. Back then I had moved from chokers to prongs. And I remember watching this low stim e-collar training thinking, this is so much more gentle than the prong collar. This is so much more gentle than the choke collar. The ways that I had been training with really harsh leash and collar corrections with chokers and prong collars, I'm thinking, this is so much more gentle. So I embraced the hell out of the e-collar. And at that point, it was like, I want to learn everything I can possibly learn about this e-collar. I was enamored by the fact that I can get a dog off leash trained really, really fast. And the model that I was taught with that was that, you can get a dog trained in a fraction of the time that it would take in traditional leash and collar training. And I found that to be the case. And so there was this huge allure that, at least in my opinion, I'm like, this is less painful than the yelping that I'm creating with the chokers and the prong collars. I'm getting the dogs trained faster. I'm getting them to do more things that I couldn't get them to do before. And one of the biggest allures to me was that, I could get a dog off leash trained with insane distractions just like that. And I became just unbelievably skilled at using pressure and trying to get dog. And I remember on my website, you're interesting. You talk about, hey, when you make that change, you got to change what you said on your website. And everything I said, everything I believed, it almost blows my mind today when I think about the things that I did. And do I feel bad about it? Yeah, I feel bad for all the dogs that had to experience unnecessary discomfort and pain. But that's what I knew. And like you were saying, it wasn't that I wanted to hurt dogs. I really felt like I'm doing a great service because I can do things and I can get dogs to behave. And especially when it came to, I had no fear of working with the aggressive dogs. I think because very early on, in my professional career, working with Andy Looper, he's got me out there working with these junkyard shepherds and Rotties and Dobermans, and I was too young to have any respect for what they could do to me. And I was just lucky enough not to have screwed up too bad and gotten my ass kicked by one of these dogs, but I became just incredibly good at using pressure. And I remember, because I think I heard a long time ago, this comes from a guy that has nothing to do with dog training, and actually a guy by the name of Ernie Larson. And Ernie Larson was a psychotherapist. He worked with children of alcoholics, adult children of alcoholics, people that came from dysfunctional families and were dealing with that kind of garbage. And I remember he said, what you live with, you learn. What you learn, you practice. What you practice, you become. And because I wanted to learn everything there was to learn about e-collars, I'm not going to say the names who I went to, but I went to all the big e-collar trainers and any courses they had, any certifications that they had, and kind of model myself after them. And the model was, I'm going to come into your home. I don't care what your problem was. And in this case, it was mainly all dogs that had either aggression and reactivity towards strange dogs, aggression towards another dog in the home, and had some aggression towards strange people. Primarily, that's what I work with. And I would get to the people's house. We'd slap an e-collar on them and get a muzzle on them. And I would get this dog walking with me and stop fighting me and even take that muzzle off, usually within a few minutes of me starting with that dog. And made what appeared to be some huge strides. That was like magic. I mean, people literally, their jaws would drop. They're like, my God, I can't believe it. I can't believe it. I think about, the only thing was, it's the same thing, but it just wasn't as ugly. I think about the Dog Daddy and how people are enamored at the Dog Daddy. He's got over 4 million followers on social media. And they see these really what appear to be aggressive dogs out of control. And he's fighting them like, breaking a lion or a wild horse. And in a few minutes, they're not fighting him and he's got the muzzle off and all is good. And, I think to myself, man, I wish I would have started when he started, because social media wasn't around back then, and all this notoriety and fame I would have had, because I had surgical precision with an e-collar, like a scalpel. I was using it to put pressure on dogs and get quick results. But as I continued to go through that process, and the one thing that saved me is that I've always been a student, meaning that I've always wanted more, wanting to learn more, get more information. I'm an information junkie. Okay. And so then all of a sudden I hear about Karen Pryor and clicker training. And then I knew nothing about markers, wasn't using a marker system because, again, I wasn't hardly using any positive reinforcement. Yeah, Andy Looper told me, go, good boy, use this crazy tonality to get a dog happy, So I'm shocking the shit out of them and saying, good boy, But now all of a sudden I'm hearing about Karen Pryor and clicker training, marker training, using markers in training, using food in training. And I had this Labrador Retriever that was just my absolute best buddy in the world, And I'm going to try this clicker training with this dog. And I remember how much faster the dog learned. All right. How much faster the dog learned. And the one thing that I'll say that helped me out was that, and I think this is the case with most really good trainers, is they have really good timing innate. Okay. And so my timing was really good. And so I excelled very quickly with the clicker training and saw what, kind of response I could get from the dog, and how fast and how much the dog loved to do the work. So I got this really fast, happy, upbeat dog doing things, and it thrilled me. And it was interestingly enough, because I'm like, okay, great. Well, let me combine both. Let me do the clicker training with the food and the e-collar at the same time. And I literally was doing both of those things and not getting the message about don't use aversives. It was just, okay, now I'm doing both of these things. The real change came for me when I've got other trainers working for me that are much younger. And I'm saying to these trainers, listen, because they're much younger and I'm trying to mentor them, I'm saying, I think down the road, it's going to be a requirement that you're going to have to be certified. I said, I don't think it's going to happen in my lifetime, but I think there's going to be a requirement in your lifetime, you're going to be certified. And so I said, so I think you guys should think about getting some kind of certification. No, I'm not certified when I'm telling them this, right? And I'm looking into things because I'm trying to mentor them. And I'm like, looks like the Certification Council for Professional Dog Trainers is the big independent one, the biggest independent one out there. You might want to check them out. Well, I'm the kind of guy that if I'm going to tell somebody that's working for me, you need to do this, I'm going to do it. Right? So it wasn't that I wanted to be certified, not that I felt that I needed to be certified, didn't really give a shit about certification. For me, I'm this old guy and been doing my thing forever, and it doesn't matter. But I get the study guide and I'm going through this, I'm like, yeah, I'm going to go do this. And it was going through the study guide for the Certification Council for Professional Dog Trainers, and then having to look at their code of conduct, their ethics statement. And they're saying, hey, you can't use aversives. Can't use choke collar. You can't use a prong collar. You can't use an e-collar. And I was like, well, I'm managing this business now. I'm not training a whole bunch of dogs. Yeah, okay, fine. Let me go ahead and sign this. And I don't need to worry about it. I'm not working that many dogs. I'm training trainers. So I do that. I go through, I get my certification, and I'm learning more. Now I'm learning about aversives and how aversives are harming dogs that have aggression and are reactive. Because remember, that is a lot of what I'm doing. I'm doing a lot of work with that e-collar, working with aggressive dogs and having a lot of success, and thinking that this suppression that I'm creating using punishment, where I'm shutting down the outward behavior that the dog is displaying, thinking that's success, thinking to myself, that's success, because they're not growling, they're not lunging, they're not trying to bite. And learning that I'm just suppressing the outward behavior. I'm not doing anything to change the underlying emotional state. Well, that hit me. That really hit me. And start thinking about, I wonder if any of these dogs that I got done so quickly Was there any lasting results with them? Or was it just a matter of a few weeks or a few months because we never addressed the dog's fear, which is usually behind most aggression, and just causing stress for the dog with the e-collar, and it was all about focus, focus, focus. As long as you can heel and look at me, I can walk you by any damn dog. You used to want to kill the dog, but now you're looking at me walking by this dog and leaving that dog alone. And the whole time, it's because of the pressure of the e-collar. And then I start, this big epiphany opens up, about, wow, we're really not, I'm not really doing anything. It's all smoke and mirrors. It's all temporary. And as I then put those tools away, okay, now I'm doing things with dogs that I had never been doing, interestingly enough, here I've got, excuse me, this master's degree in psychology. It never dawns on me because it was all just book learning. It was human psychology, counter conditioning, desensitization. What the hell is that? But I learned that. I come to that through going through this certification process and having to learn about the science and really learning about the emotional end of things with the dogs. And again, because I'm an information junkie, I'm like, all right, let's soak up all this counter conditioning and desensitization stuff and using food and how we change the emotional state of the dog and where today I have like little to no emphasis on quote unquote, it's almost politically incorrect to say obedience these days, but obedience training. Okay. I'm not doing much with dogs in terms of obedience training. Yeah, we're teaching them the basic cues, but I'm still dealing with dogs that are primarily aggressive and mainly fear aggressive. But it's all counter conditioning and desensitization, impulse control, some foundational obedience stuff. Yeah, my crossover was very late in the game, like 5 years ago, where I truly fully crossed over, where I don't use any aversive tools, don't use any aversive methods. Everything is positive reinforcement. But yeah, that's kind of my story, my evolution in a nutshell. But really struck me when you were talking about growing up as a kid and the divorce and that feeling of control, because I definitely could relate to that.
Right. Well, thank you for sharing and being vulnerable, because it takes a lot to talk about it, especially for things that we are not proud of doing.
Yeah.
One thing that you said earlier that actually made me wonder in the very beginning of my career is, how does my parents' parenting skills affect my dog parenting skills? And I notice over time there's a parallel of the way people work with their dogs. There's a direct connection with how they're being parented. And that reflects to justify certain things. So I believe many trainers out there are wounded healers.
Yeah.
They
I
have
I do.
they're very emotionally intelligent, they had feelings, they want to express feelings, they were suppressed, and they've been believed to be wrong, and that's why they got punished. The reason why they got punished because they were wrong. But there's nothing wrong for a child to express their feelings, nothing wrong with a child to try to explore. There's nothing wrong with a child to observe and do what they see is being happening, which means at the end, if we see it from a trauma informed perspective, we see those people who do use aversives have been experienced aversion themselves.
Yeah.
And as complex trauma survivor, I can totally empathize why I would do all these things and why do I need those controls and why do I need persistence and why do all these things work and I feel so good about it. It's because finally I can control something in my life that previously I couldn't.
Yeah.
And you mentioned the dog daddy, and I know him not physically in person, but I know his journey. I met him in
Mm.
distance when I did a visit up in Cape Cod in 2012. I don't remember. And he already got in trouble with authorities for breeding dogs and being a problem in the community. And one of my colleagues who I was working back then together in rescue, she pointed out the finger there and says, "Hey, this guy is doing all these things. I feel he's abusive. We should do something about it." And this then he jumped into this persona. He couldn't even handle himself. He jumped into this persona and started working through that persona. So I feel many trainers out there who are so severely abusive, for example, as he is, are emotionally problematic. They need support and help. And
Yeah.
the more we feed into that, the more they get empowered by it. They live from that. They live from fear and pain and from admiration of others. And I'm not a psychologist or psychiatrist to kind of put a tag on that, but I see this problematic, and we should do something about it and self-regulate. But we can't. There's another story about that. But before we go there, that's a whole story on its own. Um, Working with people from a healer's perspective, I'm also intuitive healer on the side. It's kind of my Trojan horse. Sometimes I can help people through their dogs and pointing things out through the dogs. I notice that people who are empaths are vulnerable, and many dog trainers out there are good empaths, and they're being damaged, and they have hard time trusting their empathy, and often use their empathy to control and manipulate, which is the worst case scenario for a healer. If we use that empathy and intuition, we can actually help the dog because the dog is telling us exactly what wants to be happening. Instead of using that as a tool to correct and punish the dog, we can use exactly that feeling to help the dog evolve, be better, independent, and we don't need to do anything anymore. One other part that I notice is there is lack of self-evaluation for people who are in aversive climates, aversive and balanced climates, because all they see is the trophy, the money, and the blessing of the clients. My God, you are a miracle worker, five
Hmm.
star reviews. That's all about. But if later on, a month later, week later, a year later, that dog collapses and falls back to his previous behavior, the whole system is in place to make the client be feeling bad
Yeah.
for not following through, and the dog being bad because of his breed genetics. And the trainer is out of the hook. And it never comes that feedback back to the trainer because A, the person feels guilty for not following through with it, and the dog is being moved somewhere else. Because, first of all, if I have to spend $5,000 and $3,000 for a training, I cannot afford it twice. I can only afford it once. What else do I have left? Well, I have left a shelter and a vet's office,
Yeah.
either or. So that trainer who did the damage never will get the feedback of what he did. And those people who train in shelters using aversive methods, the dogs being adopted, those adopters will never return the dog to that shelter because they will be blamed for it and they will feel guilty for it. And then they feel enough guilty for failing the dog. They will do it somewhere else. So that feedback loop is closed too. They're not getting any feedback. So the shelter who works aversive training and adopt dogs out, they get never out of the books that the dog returned because of training. They can return because the person failed. So that feedback doesn't never come back to the trainer because there is no authority out there to say, hey, let's follow through the process of that dog. How did the dog end up biting that child? And I give you a little example of how bad it can happen. I'm watching a video of a colleague who sent it to me and says, man, it doesn't make any sense. That dog is loving and caring, and he beats this person's face. And there was a footage, and I have that footage of a Ring camera video recording. The person, doesn't matter, male or woman, this person petting the dog. The dog is loving and caring. You can see there is affection happening there. And then suddenly the door opens and the dog attacks the person's face, the person who was petting the dog. And I'm like, I'm missing something here. How did that from petting and affection become a visual aggression when the door opens? Why is the dog not attacking the door? Why is the dog attacking his person? So, coming from a trauma informed, secure attachment based relationship approach and like holistic and all this crap, I'm putting on the plate and I'm like, it doesn't make any sense. There's a piece is missing. So I said to my friend, hey, can you give me the original? Sure. He sent me the original. And I'm slowing it down with my YouTube thing, like 75%. And then I hear in the background, beep, 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 beep. Whoa, 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 whoa. And I'm like, what was the sound again? And I play it again and again. I'm like, hey, that's a code. Somebody's beeping a code. And you know those doors, you beep the code? And then I make the connection, beep, beep, bite. Oh, let's ask the question. Was this dog being trained by a shock collar? And guess what? Bingo, right there. So when I found out that this tone sequence and the tone itself triggered the dog a survival response, the person was petting the dog, and the dog attacked the next person to him because he made the association that tone will cause pain, and the only one next to me is the person. Because the door didn't open yet, and the dog already attacked the person.
Mm.
But in the short video, it happened simultaneously, but it wasn't simultaneously. It was first the tone, then the bite, then the door open. And I'm like, holy bark. Is that what I was doing in the past?
Yeah.
Now, I didn't see just the pain and fear that happened the moment you train the dog, but also I saw the post traumatic stress and the emotional disturbance that happens in the dog system that has long time effects. Now, as a complex trauma survivor, my wife sometimes comes in, secretly opens the door, looks if I'm still with a client, and like, are you done? And I'm getting defensive. Why? I'm done in a bit. And I'm getting defensive for a question. And then looking into that, I have coping mechanism. Every time I got questions as a child, punishment was following. So my wife just asked me a question what time I'm done because she's preparing food. But I get offensive. I feel punished and I feel the associated pain with that. And I'm attacking her right back. And it's not her fault. Now I have coping mechanism. Now I can ask her a question back because now I feel in control. If I ask the question, I don't feel attacked because now I'm in control asking the question. And it took me a video of an FBI agent talking about how hostage situations being managed.
Mm.
And I was like, he was talking about pizza. What the heck is he talking about? Pizza. What does pizza has to do with anything? He said, in order to control the hostage situation, you cannot have the person who has the hostages not feel in control because then you have an unstable person.
Mm.
And so the best thing to do is to help him be in control. Do you want a pizza? I'll bring you a pizza. You can control me. Well, in order to get the pizza, you need to open the door, right? But you control me. And so the more the person feels in control, the safer he is because he's not in survival mode. He's already stressed. The last thing you want is a conflict. So conflict resolution it is. So if you deal with aggressive people who are out of control, you don't want to control them. You want to give them more control and troubleshoot through de-escalation. And I'm like, that applies to dog too, because what do we have? We have an animal that's wild, trying to survive, and has everything in its power to get you to stop. It's all about you and the dog. So if we give the dog more control, we have more control because the dog feels safe and we are safe. So therefore, our problem of not feeling safe is solved because we are in survival mode and we use the tools because we want to survive in our inner, you know, in our inner brain. And I'm not a psychologist, so don't take me kind of granted because I'm not saying the words right. But I feel that if we learn as professionals how to give more control to dogs rather than taking away control, we recognize that we have an independent dog could make independent, smart decisions because we educated them to make smart decisions in all different type of situations rather than taking away those experiences and punish them every time they show them feelings and emotions. How do they deal with things if we don't let them have emotions? And then we have this emotional breakdown, and then we have aggression, which then we excuse and use the tools. So I see that connection that you said earlier. As we growing up as children of parents who have their own belief systems, we can still break out of that cage and make a shift. So it's not about changing tools and use non-aversives. It's about breaking out of that cage that we then recognize that we were done unfair. It was injustice. We were right to be children and we were right to make mistakes and we were right to learn from it. And it was wrong to get punished for making mistakes. And it was wrong all this way because we just imitated. So we go back to that. How do dogs learn? By imitation and observing their environment. What makes the dog run and chase the bunny? That bunny is running. There is no bunny punishing the dog. There is reinforcement. And there's a lot of things where it says, well, the mom grabs the dog by the scarf and that's how they teach us. No, that's what the person sees who has been punished and justifies that. But the person who looks a little deeper, they say they have a relationship. And the mother knows how to grab the puppy that doesn't have developed nerves yet. So when the mommy picks up the scarf, the puppy doesn't feel it because the nerves are not developed yet. And she knows how to grab zero pressure and hold the puppy, not bite the puppy. For the one person, it looks like a bite, from the other person, it looks as a hold. And it's not even hold, it's not physical pressure. It's just connection. That little tiny 0 plus little 1 connection. And it's not correction and punishment. Because the foundation is relationship and the motivation is staying alive within that relationship. And so if we build a relationship first, the dog is obligated because he feels surviving in that relationship to offer his own service and his own behaviors to keep that relationship going. It's self-motivating. It's like, do we like having mistakes with our partners and we would like to get divorced? No. So we apply everything that we know about the relationship to make that work out. And so do dogs, and so do all the mammals. But we have to open that to that idea that we are providers, we meet the dog's needs, and if we don't meet the dog's needs, we will not be able to help the dog. The dog will in survival mode and he will attack us to get his needs met. But once you meet his needs and bring him that pizza, he feels good and he calms down. And now he trusts you because you bring him all that he needs before he actually needs it. And we want transformation and we want to heal the dog from a trauma. What's the best way out is to help the dog get out of that trauma loop and not getting deeper into it. And I haven't seen a person recovering by being exposed to more trauma. Like shooting a person who has trauma from shooting? Great. And I think that has to come across. And I think, and I truly appreciate you sharing that part because I think you did that exact thing. You're just recognizing those connections. Can you learn them? No, you can only learn little pieces. How you connect those learned pieces together, that's the key. So yes, you can be a book junkie and you can be an education junkie and get all this information to you. If you don't connect the dots, if you don't see those systems interacting with each other, you will not be able to make success out of it. And success is not our trophies. is the client's trophy. His relationship with the dog is the trophy. And the dog feeling safe in that household is the dog's trophy. Not something we put on a shelf. That's not the trophy. That's just the ego brain working. So yeah, again, appreciate you. And I wish we had more time in Phoenix so we could hang out
Yeah,
and talk more about
absolutely.
that stuff.
I think they're doing another. Aren't they doing their next conference? I think again in Phoenix. I think
It's very
somebody was
expensive
telling
here
me.
because I had to move
Yeah,
over
I
there from
know it
there
can
and
be
stuff like
very.
that. Yeah, that
Yeah,
was
that's the downside. Yeah, no, I hear you. No, but I think I agree with you. You know, a lot of I think a lot of aversive based trainers do come from a background like what we're talking about. And it's fascinating because, you know, you were talking about that. And I think you take a look at a lot of people that like to work with dogs, you know, a lot of them have had problems with people. You know, no wonder they like dogs. Okay. No wonder we like dogs, right? Um, and yeah, that sense of power, that sense of control, and it's interesting. Now, why do you suppose? And we're going to kind of segue into the other part of this, and that is, I mean, we know none of the information about this is really all that new in terms of science-based, evidence-based training. You know, I mean, it's pretty much been out there. I mean, even Skinner back in 38, okay, talked about how the failings of positive punishment and the fallout and the uh, preference for positive reinforcement and how the learning will be more robust and there'll be more permanence and longevity and reliability to it. All that being said, there's two things that I want to ask you, and maybe we can get into this. And one is, why are we still using aversives? Number one. That's the big one. Why is it that we can't get away from using aversives? Why is there still such a large segment of the quote unquote industry? I put that in air quotes because I don't want to call it a profession, because it's not like a profession like medicine or nursing or even professions, and you know this, you've heard it, you know, like electricians and even nail techs. They have to be certified. They have oversight. They're regulated. So the two questions I have are, number one, why is the message not getting out or being heeded when it comes to evidence-based, science-based training using positive reinforcement, force-free methods, and the fallout and the problems with using aversives, number one. And number two, why the dog training industry can't get regulated, can't have oversight like so many other professions that do have the oversight. That, you know, any other real profession, you've got to have a formal education. Once you get that, you got to prove you know your stuff by going through certification. You've got to follow certain ethical guidelines, a code of conduct, a standard of practice. You've got to have continuing education so that you stay current in the latest and greatest evidence-based, science-based practices. Why? And it's not, and here's the thing too, that surprises me. It's not, you know, I look at the US being a little unique. Okay. You know, we love our guns. And I always looked at it as, you know, we love our guns and our freedom. We're not giving that up. We're not giving up our e-collars, our prong collars either. You know, this is the wild, wild west out here. But You look at the rest of the world, granted, there's 20 some countries, believe it or not, that do legislate against shock collars and prong collars. But why is it? I think it's only, isn't it only Germany where it's required that you have to be certified or registered or something to be a dog trainer? How is it that in 2025, with everybody, for the most part, treating their dogs as true family members? You know, back in the 40s and 50s, yeah, it was the dog lived outside. But this is 2025. Everybody's dog is their baby. How is it that today there's still no oversight? There's still no regulation. How is it that we are where we're at still today? In your opinion, in your thoughts?
Well, I will use a term that I heard lately, and I feel it really hits the nail. It's the aversive tool feedback loop in dog training.
Yeah.
I've-
I heard
the
that.
whole-
It's funny you say that because until recently, I really didn't hear that either. And it makes so much sense. But go ahead, explain,
Right.
because a lot of our
So-
listeners don't know what you're going to say.
It's kind of like that the industry is putting in a belief that the tool is what you need. If you don't have that tools, you cannot live. Therefore, that tool is what gets you going. And it will self-supportive. More things have to happen, and the tool is being reinforced in itself. This is how we end America building with wood. That's why Europe builds with stones, and that's why in Africa they build with soil. That's why we use that feedback loop and shop on Amazon, because it's just more convenient. And obviously, if you don't have an Amazon account, you cannot survive. Like, how do you survive with an Amazon account? Your account is canceled, you're going to die, and it perpetuates itself. So it's hard to get out of that. So there's this first degree path dependence, where the industry clings to aversive tools because it's always have been used. They bring you that idea. You as new trainer, you only see the path through their information loop. Well, that's what dog trainers do. They use aversive tools. They don't call it aversive. They use it. These are training tools, right? It's a quick tool that makes you feel good. And then you have the second degree dependence, where trainers and guardians literally realize the limitation, but hesitate to change. And in fear that if I remove that tool, my business will collapse. I went through that second degree path. I was like, what if I talked it, how would I deal with aggressive dogs? Am I still a trainer? And the third degree, which is the most troubling one, is the industry locks you into that inefficient, harmful model, despite the evidence. They don't let you get out. And there's a lot of money going in. I mean, this is a $5 or $15 billion industry. Why would they give up that part? You cannot live without. How would hunters function without the shock collar training? How would rescue function without shock collar training? How be a professional? How do a person in the home not function without a bark correction or e-collar correction? Like, give an example. You can. See, I told you cannot. So let's go down the route. You have to buy it. And the only thing to get out of that cycle is education and shifting the narrative from the quick fixes and getting people out of that quick fix idea, because it's brainwashed into them that a healing process, it's not a quick fix, it's a long-term solution. And it has to be humane, and it has to be positive reinforcement, and it has to foster trust. And you have to build a new feedback loop through connection and confidence. And then you have the community, because if without the community, you will not be able to push it any further. And that's why we have our groups, and we try to promote those ideas through the groups. But we have to protect each other as well, and not going after each other's throat, because everybody goes through a learning process. Of course, they're gonna use a Halti because they believe it's less aversive, because somebody told them it's a happy Halti. No, it's not. I mean, we know evidence, scientific evidence for horses to have traumatic experiences and eventually have to be put down. Just because it's okay with us doesn't mean it's okay for the dog. And we cannot excuse it because some people need that because they are sensitive people. And like, wait a minute, are we saying that it's okay to harm the dog for the person's well-being? Why does this person have to have that tool? Why don't we educate the person? Why don't we educate the dog? Why does the person who is 90 years old have to have a 130-pound puppy? Why is the puppy not educated before he goes to that person? Why does the person have to deal with that himself? Why is the community not supporting that person? But then we have the advocacy, and we don't have policy changes, and we don't ban those tools. We will not be able to disrupt that system. But again, there's too much money involved. So all these people who supposed to support that policy cannot support the policy because they're benefiting from it as it is. So Norway and Sweden has already done that, and they're just very successful about it. However, there is a key into that. Going out of that loop and believing that we're out of that loop and remove all those tools doesn't mean people would not still continue aversive, because you can use aversive as your hand and your legs and your newspaper. You're going to ban newspapers and legs. The key is to help shift mindset. People recognize that you don't have to use those tools. But sometimes they will not be able to see that because they are traumatized people themselves. They don't see, they have to admit that what happened to them is as bad as they doing to their dogs. And that's a big thing to ask. But we can only work as far as we can. And it's not one generation, maybe 3, 4 generations until we get so far. And that's on us.
Yeah, with and this is a more full disclosure. I mean, because I could cycle through dogs much faster and what appeared to be success. Okay. And because I could market it as this quick fix. Yeah, when I was using aversive tools and when that was my business model, I was making more money and I had more business. And things take longer now, and I've got to spend more time with the clients now. And the process is more in depth now. Granted, we've got longevity, permanence, and reliability in the outcome of the behavior. But it was one thing to take the dive of, okay, I'm going to trust trying to do things with just positive reinforcement and really hone my skills and go in that direction. But then looking, there's a lot of trainers that are going to have a lot of fear. Well, how am I going to have success without the tool? This is what I know to do. This is what has helped me to get where I am, just in the perspective of me being able to, quote unquote, produce results or show results. But then it's the other thing too. It's the money, and with the rise of board and train, everybody now nobody wants to go anybody's home. Everybody wants to do a 2-week board and train. Give me your dog. Let me put a shock collar on it. Whatever the problem is, we're going to fix it in 2 weeks. And you're going to give me $3,000-$4,000. And then in 2 weeks later, I'm going to get another one. And isn't that wonderful? Because now I got a facility. I can take on, 20, 30, 40 dogs at, $3-4 grand a pop every 2 weeks.
That's the new loop.
Churning. Yeah, that's the model. That is the model. It's funny. When I started training in Phoenix, there was like little to no board and train. And I remember back then, I certainly didn't pioneer the idea, but I seemed like a pioneer because very few people were doing it. And I called it Doggy Boot Camp because that was more pet friendly sounding, Doggy Boot Camp. And I get it. I mean, I get the whole idea of, there's a ton of money that can be made in this business. And and the people that are doing the board and train model. And if they've got a facility, they're churning lots of dogs in and out. They're making a lot of money. And I guess, do you follow at all? I don't follow that well. Some of the things that have taken place in the U.S., like recently, there was that bill that was proposed in New Jersey that I don't think it passed. Did it just get tabled?
It's on hold.
Yeah. Where do you know? Tell me what you know about it, because what blows my mind is that, again, with everybody loving their dogs like they're little babies, how science-based, evidence-based, positive reinforcement, force-free trainers, how their voice gets drowned out more by aversive trainers that are talking to legislators. I don't get it, but I'm not involved with what went on in New Jersey, and I only know a little bit. What do you know?
Well, the bill is called S3814, and it's basically a bill that wants to regulate and organize and stop the abuse of animals in general. Um, if we have a possibility, we can actually share the link so people can read through that. So it seeks to regulate dog trainers and ban aversive tools like shock collars, prong collars, choke collars, and everything that. And it faced a lot of opposition and false claims. And the first hearing that happened, unfortunately, it was a really disaster from a force-free perspective, because only one or two people showed up from a force-free field, and a lot of
Wow.
people went there actually supporting not the bill and telling them that people who will vote for the bill will actually be responsible for all these dogs being surrendered to the shelters, and the world will collapse if they approve that bills, and blah blah blah, and totally ignore science. And actually, in fact, they brought actually a dog in there and did exactly a demonstration of how easily this little dog can be corrected. So these people were actually convinced that they should hold on to the bill, even though in the beginning they were totally about it and almost signed it. But in the hearing, everything changed, because all of a sudden, since you only have one versions of people telling you, no, it's wrong, don't pay the bill, and nobody there to defend it, well, if I'm a legislator, I'm going to question the bill.
Yeah. I'm shocked that, because obviously that bill that was brought to the legislature in New Jersey didn't have its birth in a aversive dog training facility. It had to have come out of force-free, positive reinforcement camp. And I can't believe that they would be that irresponsible.
Well,
and yeah, I'm just blown away.
Talking to Linda Michaels about that,
Yeah.
gets you more details about that, because I came in very late to the bill and to that knowledge of that bill.
Yeah.
I had my health issues happening, so I was not very open to kind of getting anything in my brain at that point. I got very late. I wrote down my concerns, and I did a video about that and sent it in. It was also one key factor people like to sign the bill, until I wasn't able to get there and defend the bill myself. I didn't have the financial background to go there, because it was like $4,000 to go there, or actually 2,300 if I take care of moving there, staying there, and then coming back with the car and all this stuff. I didn't have that money back then. And so I got basically stuck. But that's not over yet.
Okay.
There's a lot of movement happening in the background. There's a lot of confusion happening between both fields. Who's dying what, and who's doing what, and why they're doing, and why they should do it and not us doing it, and why do should we agree on that and not agree on our terms. So there's internal friction happening that needs to be clarified first. The first question, I think I hope I answered the question. The first question, ADD brain here. Um, but the second question, that regulation that you said, even that I agree with the regulation. It should be regulated and it should be put in place. There should be a moral, ethical approach happening there, and not just putting down just science and just experience and just signing a paper that I will comply to those things. The ethical part is an important piece here, and that needs to be put first.
When you
And
say
we
when you
cannot
say the ethical part needs to be put first, I want to make sure that I understand
that the
you.
training approach that we do is ethical
Yeah.
and not beneficial, because the benefit is the person has the benefit of the approach. But is that approach ethical to
Hmm.
get to that?
Hmm.
Because yeah, considering that the person feels good about it, it's why people work, and that's why people don't want to let go of their tools, because it helps the people. But it's not ethical.
Yeah.
Imagine a nurse will function like that.
Right.
Imagine a surgeon will function like that. Oh, we're going to do a quick fix. Easy in, easy out. So he's off our books. And you die at home and nobody cares about it. Well, you've been fixed. You should be happy. Give a 5-star review before you die.
Yeah.
But that's not how it works. And yeah, it's a healing process. We are in the belief, observing the behavior. That's what we have to fix. When in reality, it's the dog's mind that is triggered, and if emotion comes to surface, and that emotion is being expressed in behavior.
Yeah.
And how do you fix that? By fixing the behavior, or helping the dog see a different image, make the trigger be different. But on the other hand, if we go down the positive reinforcement side, for example, me as a complex trauma survivor and person who is being physically abused and betrayed, how much trade should I get to be okay with it? Does it make okay if I take the treat? When that person touched me and gave me money for it, is that okay? I took the money, therefore I'm fine. I should be grateful? No. It's a healing process. And my body has to go through that healing process, not my mind and not my belly. Even though everything goes to the belly, even medication and even food, belly generates a lot of feelings and emotions that we have to work around. It's still a somatic response. So instead of looking at these quick fixes, we should see it's a healing process, and healing process takes a little bit longer, but actually it doesn't take long, because it's that loop that I said earlier. We believe that quick fixes are quick and healing is slow. No, healing is fast, considering that if you don't do it that way, you're going to be here forever. So the quick fix is not, we don't even mention the quick fix, because quick fix doesn't fix anything.
Right.
It just makes you temporarily feel good. It's like a drug. So we drug things and we're good with it? No, we heal things and it's done forever. That's quick. Not the other one. The other one is a fake quick. But at the same time, if we put these regulations in place, we have to define that quick and that healing process and that convenience. Because if I ban all those tools, the people can still use tools they have at hand. Like people used leashes. You ban the
Mhm.
leashes, you can't pull the leashes. You ban the boots, you cannot ban the boots because somebody has to wear boots. So you get stuck. So we have to, as a culture, we have to shift. See that we have an obligations. We don't have any rights. And have an obligations as a behavior consultant or as a professional to help the dog recover. I don't have a right to charge them because I offered the service. I have an obligation. And I think it comes also with the dog parents. They have an obligation to meet the dog's needs. They don't have a right to pet the dog. But that's me, just in my brain.
I look at it as there's a couple things. And one, just like myself, there was that time when I didn't know what I didn't know. And I believed what I believed, the things I was saying, I believed. I said it over and over. And granted, I'm sure I heard it from somebody that was also a compulsion-based or balance trainer. That, positive reinforcement is great for teaching a dog what to do, but it doesn't do a damn thing as far as stopping an unwanted behavior. You need a correction for that. You need punishment for that. I mean, I believed that. I parroted that over and over. I looked at the 4 quadrants in operant conditioning and said, hey, what about this other side? Why are those positive reinforcement trainers denying science? Those were I parroted those terms. Why are they denying science and throwing out half the science? Nobody told me. Nobody told me that there wasn't a requirement in operant conditioning that you don't have to use all those quadrants just because they're there. Just because they're there. There's a trainer, and I've called him out for it. I won't call him out again, but there's a trainer out there that had done a podcast and continues to bring up this notion about nature. What's in nature? That animals are genetically programmed to, when there's a hot stove and you reach out, to recoil from it. That in life, the rose isn't just a rose, it's got thorns too, and so therefore, because in nature, we have this hostile part of nature, I guess you'll call it, that punishment is natural. And you talked about how, the mom corrects the pups or whatever. What we don't talk about is that 99.9% of the communication is not conflict. Okay, that they're using a sophisticated canine body language to show appeasement signals, things of that nature. But how much, we've got the problem with trainers out there that were just like me, that, I felt like, I'm saving dogs' lives. Because, the positive folks, they'd rather euthanize, same shit. They'd rather euthanize a dog than give a correction. I used to say that all the time too. It's not true, but it sounded good. Trying to make sense out of something that I could make sense of, even though I wasn't really looking to try to at the time. But how many, or what part of it is just ignorance? I don't know that I don't know. And how much of it is, well, I know, but I don't want to make that shift. I don't want to make the shift because it's going to cost me money. It's going to cost me business. I've been saying this for 10 years. All my marketing is towards this. How do I make that change? And then the other thing, so let's say tomorrow that we ban all those tools and we say, okay, now you've got to be certified. Okay. One of the arguments that I hear from the other side is, you can't put those people out of business. You can't take away their ability to make money. Now, granted, we could say, well, we're not taking away their ability to make money. They can still train dogs. But if that's the only way they know how to train dogs, has there been talk about, let's say that there was legislation that said, hey, you got to train a certain way. There's got to be ethics and you can't use aversives. Is there going to be, or anybody talked about there being some kind of a transition period?
Well, let me give you a little bit the summary
Yeah.
of the bill, as far as I remember, and
Okay.
I don't want to be lynched for that. So the New Jersey Bill S3814 is introduced in October 2024 and aims to establish a dog training licensing board under the Division of Consumer Affairs to license and regulate dog trainers statewide. In that case, in New Jersey.
Mhm.
But the reason why it's so important is because New Jersey, once that bill passes, it will affect also the other bills out there that may eventually come to surface.
Right.
So the board would develop educational, experiential requirements for licensure, like I guess I said right,
Mhm.
create an evidence-based humane training code of practice that prohibits aversive methods such as shock collar, prong collars, and enforce ethical standards aligned with veterinary behavior science. Trainers with at least 1 year of prior experience would be exempt from initial education requirements but must comply with the Humane Code. So there is a transition happening there. The bill excludes individuals training police and government service dog and includes provisions for complaint, investigation, and disciplinary actions to ensure public and animal safety. So they talk about the ethical part, they talk about the educational part, they talk about the transition part, they talk about the tool part, they talk about the exemption part, because of course you cannot change the military industry and the police industry just over a day. It just takes a month, a year, it takes longer to shift the whole process. And it gives also a mechanism to check and balances, making sure those people are actually compliant to that, and you can call them out on that. And I think that that's enough there to work on. Of course, there are some things to be detailed on, and of course, usually when builds start like that, they usually chip here and cut there, and it's going to end up less. But if you don't push in that direction, we're not getting a build done, and we're not going anywhere. And we do have evidence that it works. UK banned shock collars in police training for a very long time, since 2000, if I remember right. So that works. German does that too. And Austria does it too. And Swiss does. And Norway does. And those people are not stupid. They have longer dog training education, dog training culture than we have. I remember when I was a child, we're going to dog schule. It's kind of like going to school. That's what you do. There's no question. That you have a dog, you go to school. That's what you do. Not when the problem hits the fan, and then you do it earlier,
Yeah.
proactive rather than reactive. So that it's possible, but we have to shift as a culture. So I think supporting that bill is a good way to get it going and start creating leverage. And yes, people will hurt, because the reality is, as a person who are working with animals, is providing animals a service. The reason why we work with animals is because they supposed to feel better. It's not about the money. Does it affect us money wise? Yeah, I wouldn't do that if I wouldn't make money out of it. But money should not be the front. It's a healing process. It's a service to others service. It's not service to myself service. So we have to get out of that. I'm not being a dog trainer because I make money out of it. Yes, there are a lot of money to be made if you are right, and if you do it right, and if you set up the system right, and if you do marketing right, just like any other business. But abusing animals should not be in your schedule. Imagine we had that system in place for children. Like, what do you do with those people and those teachers who cannot use those aversive tools? Are they going to starve? And what about the kids? Are the teachers not there to teach the kids? So now we put the teachers first before the kids? Or do we put the kids first before the teachers? Do their kids not creating teachers? Or can teachers be without kids? So we cannot be without dogs. Therefore, dogs are priority. And we cannot make money until the dogs are behaving better. but that has to come with ethics, not with a dollar sign. So you can be ethical dog trainer and make a lot of money, and you can be an unethical dog trainer and also make a lot of money. But at the end of the day, when you be on a deathbed, how would you feel better? Being an ethical dog trainer and make money and be rich, or being an unethical dog trainer and make money and be rich? It's up to the person. And no matter what bills you put in place, and no matter how regulations and aversives you put in place for them not to do it, they will still do it if they want to do it. Because I had the chance to do it and I choose not to. But that's a choice. Nobody convinced me, nobody forced me to do it. It hurt, I did it anyway. It damaged my business. I started my business 3 times all over the place because I wasn't happy with what I was doing. I said, that's not me. Next, next, next. And yes, shelters have to be compliant. I cannot call myself humane society and accept shock collar training and prong collars and adopt dogs out with those tools. It's inhumane. No matter what reasons you have to get this off your chart, it's inhumane, and you should not call yourself humane. And I'm not going in any organization, I'm just saying in general, because many humane societies have to use those tools, because otherwise the dogs get stuck. And I have proven in the past, and you have proven too, that you can get quick results. I can go in a shelter, work with that dog in less than 10 minutes. A, because I have the skills. B, I have intuition. 3, I have understanding. I'm emotional intelligence, let's call it this way. And I can communicate with the dog. You need emotional intelligence to work with the dog. IQ doesn't cut. But can we transfer that information to the adopters and the people who work there? Are force-free trainers, and I wouldn't put even force-free. I think force-free is kind of a gray zone. I would say do no harm trainers. They are affordable if you see the big picture. Because if a do no harm trainer leaves that facility, those people being behind, they know how to recreate that. And these people start becoming independent, so they can handle their own dogs without having external intervention. But if you hire a punishment trainer, you're going to stuck with a punishment trainer. Without them, you will not adopt dogs out. And without selling those tools, you will not be able to successfully adopt the dogs out. Is that what you want to do? Are you kind of like a salesperson? Or are you a person who wants to help dogs? So we have to shift our mindset, what we're actually doing here. A shelter should not be a prison. And it's all about efficiency. It should be a healing process, a healing place, an emergency room. From shelter into adoption, a shelter into foster, and then healing. The dog ends up in a shelter is because the system failed, not because the dog failed. Because the financial problem happened, because the health happened, because the behavior happened, not because of the dog. So that's not be measured in money, should be measured in success. Is the dog happier by the end of the day? And this is more complex. But because it's complex, we shouldn't make it too complex, because then nothing gets done. Why does Germany doesn't have shelters like we do? They have shelters to capture stray dogs. That's it. And why is that? Because there is a belief system behind that. People have a mindset. They're animal aware. We don't say dogs pets, we call them house animals. But that's already put here some perspective what you think about an animal. Is an animal that's an animal that lives in a house. A pet is a completely different level. A pet is owned by a person, and therefore a person has rights, but an animal doesn't, because it would be a free animal. It would be a pet. But once we have this pet ideology and bring the pet in the home, and because we don't want to call them pet, we call them family, doesn't fix the problem we have that we see pets as an object. And the object has a problem, we need to fix it at any cost, because the faster the better. And then we're missing the part of us being healers of a dog who has a problem, and become a fixer downer instead of fixer upper. And we see it that shock collar system and the prong collar system hasn't reduced anything. Still dogs being adopted out and dogs being rehomed in their shelters. And we only captured 23% of those dogs being moved around between people and shelters. The rest gets under the radar. Vets' offices, interfamily exchange, and friends and family. This is three-quarters of those dogs being rehomed happens under the radar. Nobody captured that. And why is that? Because the dog was failed, because there's lack of education and lack of training skills. That's why. But that's me. And I'm sure you likely will confirm it because you've been there too long.
Yeah, it's just, I think, how they say ignorance is bliss. Ignorance was bliss when I didn't know better. you know um but now, going back to what you were saying earlier, this, how you mentioned that we don't get the calls, like the failures and things of that nature. Well, that was one of the interesting things of crossing over to, force free was, today I do get those calls. I get the calls from the pet parents that had their dog at a aversive based board and train, or did private lessons with a trainer that used a shock collar or a prong collar, and the fallout from that. I get those calls on a regular basis. And the way I look at it is, yeah, if I sent my dog to a board and train and they used a shock collar and everything didn't matter. If everything was great for a week, 2 weeks, a month, 2 months, it's not good now. Yeah. And they may have called that board and train back, and, the board and train blamed them. Well, you didn't follow up, blah, blah, blah. It's your fault. So now they're looking elsewhere, and they're looking beyond an e-collar and looking to something different. And now that I'm that something different, I'm hearing these stories about the fallout with the e-collar and all that stuff where, yeah, I probably had the same issues, but people weren't calling me back because, like, well, we did that. It didn't work. Why am I going to go back and do the same thing over and over again, expecting different results?
Right. Very true.
But, there's a part of me that just really just finds it just mind blowing. That's why I was surprised as to what happened in New Jersey. And I heard that the American Kennel Club was a vocal opponent to that, which, I'm not big into AKC, the American Kennel Club, anymore. It's been decades since I've done anything with American Kennel Club. But that I was a little surprised by. But no, they're still. I thought American Kennel Club had kind of moved over into positive reinforcement, but apparently no.
Well, they're supporting breeders, and breeders go to shows. And what are the tools we use for shows? A choke collar.
Yeah.
How do you ban that? Are you go against the choice, against your own people? And how would you train dogs to be compliant in AKC if you're not forcing them to comply? So we have a compliance problem. And of course, they see that it's going to be challenged. And of course, they get money for paying for it. So they're not challenging it. They stay out of it. So, of course, I was expecting that. I didn't expect them to be so loud about it. I was expecting them to be kind of quiet about it, but they were very open about it. They're like, okay, I can see the picture why that happens and why you're supporting that. So AKC is not animal supportive. It's all about how you make more money of your members, creating those features. And yeah, you're a aversive breeder, so what? Call yourself ethical, pay me the bill, and you're good. You're kind of in our list. And then you have Department of Agriculture Of course, these people would get money from it, but they get money anyway. They get money also from breeders. 2 million dogs being poured out into the system with the signature of the Department of Agriculture, backyard breeders. Not anymore, that factory breeders, but that's what it is. So they sign up for these 2 million dogs who feed the system. And the Department of Agriculture also controls the feeding procedure, which means those million dogs coming out there being have to be fed. And who's going to purchase that? People. And who's going to benefit from it? The companies. And who's paying them? The companies. So we see already the closed loop there that's happening. There's all little loops. Once you zoom out of it, you see all these little loops happening there and how this entwined. And then we're coming in and says, well, that's unethical. Who cares about our little loop? We have bigger loops to deal with. But hey, you know what? It takes one thing out of the pullover to pull out, and the whole pullover falls apart. So we need to be those little pieces of the puzzle that makes the whole picture be big. And I appreciate you for talking about that and open up and sharing those things, because if we're not sharing our shit, people will not see what we have been through. Are we successful? Yes, we are. Are we losing clients? Yes, we do. Are we losing dogs? Yes, we do. We're not lying about it, but we know why we do it. And we understand that it's not just about training. Sometimes the dogs have neurological issues. Yes, you're going to lose those
Mm-hmm.
dogs. Yes, those people will come to us because everything else failed. We're not making fun out of it. We're not making a mamie out of it. That's our reality. Yes, I cry when I lose a client, and I cry and I go with them to the vet's office if that's the case have to happen. Not because we failed, it's because there was not other options available. We went the medical route, we went the psychological route, we went the attachment route, we went all these routes. We have nothing left behind. And we recognize that the dog has neurological deficiency, the dog is not safe for himself. And we're sorry about that. But chocolate doesn't cut it either. It just makes things worse. And yes, we did the treatment route and the herbal route and the energy route and the healing route. We did all this. We did all this. We didn't get stuck with punishment and punishment and punishment, and that said, that's all. That's not all. That's just maybe 1% of everything that you could do to address an issue. So when we say we are holistic or we see things from a holistic perspective, we take all these things in consideration. And yes, I will call a colleague. I will call Will and says, hey, Will, I have a case. Here's that's what's happening. And you're like, yeah. Well, here's my second pair of eyes. Let's call in a nutritionist. Let's call in, and we have all these options of having a multidisciplinary approach. A board and training doesn't cut that. Show collar doesn't cut it. It's just one tool. It either works or it works with punishment, but it doesn't work anyway. It's just an illusion. But hey, it feels good if you can spend only $120 instead of paying $5,000. And well, it didn't work out. Well, the dog still bites. Well, put that next. Ignore the trauma and go to the next trauma tool. Because we're not trauma aware. We don't see what we're doing has an effect. If we knew, then we see why the dog are reacting in the first place. And then we wouldn't use tools in the first place. But I had to come to that realization the hard way, just like you did.
Yeah, I think here too, in the United States, we're a violent culture. We're a violent culture.
A term that comes to my mind that I never experienced in Europe, I'm European, is we are a get it done culture. You want to dig a mountain? Get it done. Get people dig. Do it. No matter how, get it done. And that culture is being, you want to graduate? Get it done. You don't care. You need a credit? Get it done. It's all about get it done, but that's a lot of pressure happening to one person, have to get it done. And then we have to use any tool available to get it done, even if it's unethical, because that's the culture. Is this a bad thing? No, because I'm now part of it. When I got my citizenship, I was aware of that. So I was like, I want to make a little bit of a change of that, get it done. I wanted to get it ethical done, get it done. And I can prove it. I have a proven track record. I have all my records of all my clients I've worked for the last 15 years. I have it on record. You have no money how money I pay for storage for those videos and messages
Mm.
and documents. And that's proof. I'm not hiding it. And I have the reviews from real people. I didn't buy them. They're there.
Yeah.
And I have feedbacks. I have, I think, 1,200 entries of people giving me feedback about their own experience, not how good I am or how good they are, what they felt about it. And that counts. But it's not my trophy, it's their trophy.
Yeah.
It's their achievement. And that's what we have to praise. It's people learning how to handle those dogs and helping them transform that relationship. It's not the trainer who did anything. If the person doesn't do it and the dog doesn't take it, it's not. It's not going to work.
What there's bound to be a trainer or two that at some point sees this, maybe hears this, and maybe they're a balance trainer, and maybe they've thought about crossing over. Maybe they've thought about doing things more ethically. Maybe they've struggled themselves a little bit with aversive methods, aversive tools. Um, you've talked with and you've mentored, I believe, and have worked with other trainers that were kind of in that situation. What would you say to them?
When I work with my colleagues who want to transition, the first thing we look into is their own trauma and help put some feelings in place. If we're not aware of our own trauma and our own triggers, we will not be able to defend ourselves being triggered by a dog. We take it personally, which is not the case. We shouldn't take it personally. The dog is just reacting to something that triggers him, not us. He doesn't know us, never had coffee with us. And from that point, we also have to recognize the person who is a balanced trainer is not an aversive trainer, which is a transition in itself. Why don't
Mhm.
you use aversion? Why do you use rewards? Because you don't feel that's a good thing to do, which is great. Let's build on that. If we have to punish a behavior and we're not recognizing where the behavior stems, it's like cutting a tree and not recognizing the roots underneath. And not recognize those roots, we don't see the connection that other trees have around. And so if you cut that tree, the other trees suffer from it. And you don't see that, you're not a dog trainer. Because all you see is the dog's behavior and you don't see the root cause of it. Why would you punish a dog who is reactive and biting people if you don't recognizing that his digestive system is freaked out? Why don't you see that the first emotion of a dog being hungry is being hangry, and that gets you a bite? How many people missing that they have to feed 4 times a day their puppy, otherwise it's going to get mouthy? It needs, and needs means take your hand and do something with it because I need right now. Why would you punish that? Why would you punish a dog who has a medical underlying condition and you didn't recognize that because you only saw a behavior? Why would you punish a dog who feels unsafe around people and you feel forcing him to do something will make him feel better? If you don't see these things, you shouldn't be a dog trainer in the first place. It's like going to the gym and not recognizing that weights can harm you if you fall on your leg. And if you push too heavy weights, you're going to break your back. So, we are not a trainer. You think you are a trainer. But in reality, what I see is a person who wants to help animals, which means you have empathy. which means you are an empathetic person. You have feelings. And so, can you touch those feelings? Can you feel them? Can you see that dog's feelings? Because if you don't see those feelings, you will not be able to work with that dog. Because if you don't recognize that aggression is part of a feeling, then you don't know what you're dealing with. You're poking around in a nest and you don't know what's going to come out. So the first thing we have to call out is becoming an emotionally intelligent person before you become a trainer. And that emotional education is important. How do I feel right now? Is this feeling mine, or do I feel somebody else's feelings? Because many professionals get anxious because they're empathetic to the dog anxiousness, and they feel bad about it. They don't want to be anxious, and they use punishment to stop that from happening. So they're in defense mode. A dog who is angry and frustrated makes me anxious and I want to stop that. I'm going to use everything possible because I'm in survival mode, because I'm an empath. So I have to start channeling that emotion. Is it my emotion, or is it the emotion that I'm channeling? And if it's emotion and channeling, it's not my emotion. Therefore, I know how to handle that because I can feel exactly how it feels. Therefore, I feel the antidote. It's exactly the opposite. If I feel fear, I need support and I need trust. And if trust feels different than fear, I can feel the difference. It tells me how continue doing that. And that becomes a reinforcer. You can use trust as a reinforcer. You can use relationship as a reinforcer. Of course, you can use food, but there's also a primary and a secondary reinforcer. Are you aware of those? Do you see that reinforcing a dog to do something they don't want is actually not healthy for the dog and causes other problems? Just because you use food doesn't mean you're positive.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, you're positive as a person and you think positively, but what you just did is actually reinforcing the thing you don't want to reinforce. But again, we have to think beyond behaviorism. We have to see that the dog is not just an animal that needs corrections or rewards. It's an animal. It's a sentient being. It has feelings. It has ancestors. It has genetics. It's being triggered by the environment. All these things come to place. Plus, it maybe has a spirit that you don't want to look at, but yet here it is. And previous cultures, thousands of years before us, have believed that. So are they all wrong and we are right all of a sudden because we have an Amazon account and we watch TV? What happened to all these hundreds of thousands of years of evolution? How did these people end up in a cave with a dog protecting themselves with each other? We will be able as a culture to be, or as a humanity, to be who we are without those dogs? I don't think so.
Mm-mm.
And so these are things that I talk to my mentors. This is what you have to see when you work with a dog. You will see the potential of that dog, not his behavior. You see his learning trajectory and see what you can improve for the dog to learn faster and better rather than correcting him faster and better. Can you predict the action that you do, what behavior it will show up? Can you tell me that 3 steps down the road? If you cannot do that, don't even start. If you don't have it mapped out, only for you to do minor adjustments. But if you're not mapping out and hit the wall and then, oh, I shouldn't use that tool. Why would you use that tool at the beginning if you don't know how it's going to end? Which means you're not knowing what you're doing. You always hit the wall and then, like a bumper car, hit the wall and then turn. No, we don't do that. It's a healing process, it's not an experiment. And I regret experimenting on my dogs in the past.
Yeah.
A lot. I feel guilty about it. But hey, I didn't know better, as you said before. I didn't know that I didn't know.
Didn't know that I didn't know. Didn't know what I didn't know. Yeah. Yeah, it really is about educating. It really is about educating and it's a strange time that we live in with this idea of the last couple decades, fake news, alternative truths. this war against science, war against intellectualism. You know, when we can't each agree that this is the color red, one person says, no, that's not red, it's green. Just a very strange time. A very strange time, I find. And you know, that, not that I'm going to get in, I don't want to get into politics and stuff like that, but you know, you immigrated to this country. You saw a lot of craziness as you were leaving more oppressed cultures and societies. And we're kind of seeing some of that craziness start to sprinkle in here in the U.S. But it's crazy time. What would you say to somebody that, you know, might also be watching that? I mean, this is, if they've stuck with us this far, it's a different kind of podcast today. But somebody that you know, might be thinking about becoming a dog trainer, somebody that might be thinking about wanting to get into this industry, what advice do you have for them?
This is the best thing you can do.
The best thing they can do?
It's a journey. Working with dogs, especially with dogs or animals in general, is a journey through your inner world. And being able to tap into and feel other species' feelings and speak their language in a way that's not physically is audible is a different dimension. I can only compare it with going to dive at the beach and dive to reach the coral reef and go beyond that coral reef and then see the real world of oceans. It's like getting out of the swimming pool and diving into the jungle kind of difference. As an industrial engineer, and my job was basically system integration, is taking machinery and make them work. My ethical approach was keep improving the quality of the workers and not taking them away, make the environment safe for them to work and not taking their work away. Made me actually stop my what I was doing because I ended up being pushed into, no, we need less workers, we need more machines. And I'm like, I'm not doing that. We need a machine to kill better people. I'm not doing that. We need harnesses that are cheaper so we can sell more munition and more rockets. No, I'm not doing that. System integration. Let's make a dog who is robot. No, I'm not doing that. I had those options to sign the papers and I didn't. But working with dogs, it's my calling. But not working with dogs is my calling. Is working dogs and people is my calling. Helping them heal their relationship, which means I'm a mediator, helping them communicate with each other, building their relationship back again, finding their real purpose. And it's going ultra spiritual, but it's part of what we really do. We are not just here to make money, we're not here to survive, we're here to experience, right?
Yeah.
And if we go a little bit religious, we can say we are an aspect of the one, and that one we are aspect about is for us to have these unique individual experiences of that one is. So I am that. And if I don't know what I am, then I'm not nothing. I'm just nothing. So an animal would give you that option to see who you are in real time. If you have a behavior, if you have an emotion, if you have a feeling, and you get that instant feedback, that's, you cannot buy that stuff. It's like turning the switch on and recognize the light is on, you get that feedback speed. And for some magic reason, that feedback is faster now than it was earlier in the time. So if I remember 10 years back, my choices didn't have immediate feedback. It had a little delayed feedback, maybe a month, maybe two. Now it's instant. You make a decision, you get feedback. So working with dogs, it's an amazing feeling of having instant feedback because they react upon you faster than you do. So that's the instant feedback. And that makes you be a better person, makes you be aware of how you feel and how you affect your environment. Thinking about things and putting intentions in place will get you a dog's feedback. I want to get up and make the intention. Dog is like, oh, where are we going? Dude, are you a psychic? Yeah, he is. And getting that level of communication makes you be more aware of nature, and makes you aware more nature makes you aware of what's your impact, which makes you aware of what you're choosing to live with and how you deal with and what you used to live with, and your chemicals and your emotional footprint will change, and your material footprint will change, your carbon footprint, everything will change. And that change can, call it Rex or Buddy or whatever name you give your dog. If you're not willing to do that, then you shouldn't be a dog trainer. You should be just doing whatever work you want to do. But once you get in that level, even if it's just being with a dog, I don't even want to use the dog owning, but being with a dog is already a form of transformation. So cultures transforms with dogs. Gods were praised for dogs. We have a dog star system. Why would that be? Just because they're nothing? There must be something. The doggone. The dog people. Where is this coming from? The Native Americans, they have histories of saying that God created people and dogs, but first the dogs and then the people, and people didn't treat the dogs well, so he replaced the people with better people. Why would the culture say that? Where is it coming from? There's something there. So I think we should be very careful how we approach animals and how we treat animals and how ethical we think about animals, and not seeing them just for consumption as we're being preyed into this other loop that animals are here for humanity to be served. No, we are part of the animal kingdom. And we should coexist, not use. But that's on us, it's not on them. So as a trainer, as a dog behavior consultant, as a care professionals, as a veterinarian, no matter what you are, you have to come with that sensitivity that what you do affects the environment, and you're here to improve the environment, not to just to affect it. And I think when you die at some point, do you go to heaven? I don't care where you're going, but at least you go, I did the right thing. But that's me.
Do you like, well, how do you feel about, and then we'll wrap up here. How do you feel about the term guardian?
As a guardian expert, guardian breed expert, I would say there are legal terms like pet owner gives you a legal status. As a guardian, I would say gives you a responsibility status, but as a parent, gives you an ethical status. I'm parenting my dog. I want my dog at some point to be independent so it doesn't depend on me anymore. As a guardian, I have to always care, making sure everything his needs are met and everything is perfect for that dog, protecting the dog and make everything sure that's where the guardian comes in. But as a pet owner, there's also responsibility, legal responsibility. If my dog makes a mistake, I have to pay for it. If my dog attacks another person, I'm responsible for it. It's not the dog. So we have to see that those terms affect us the way we see it. So I'm a dog parent, dog owner, guardian, and a companion, and a soulmate. I'm all these things at once at the same time. So it's not one or the other, but definitely I don't have pets because that eliminates everything else. It just makes me an owner who has a pet.
So you wouldn't like the term pet parent then? Just because of calling him a pet, or
recognizing where the term pets come from, if not nailing it down historically, but it
Yeah.
happens in France. It happens with people who had dogs and they had their own pets for them to be pleased. So a
Hmm.
pet is an item for pleasure. And we took that term and brought it to us. We are responsible for that term. So if I use the word Holocaust and I'm not aware where it's coming from, why do I use it? So pet comes from there. It comes with a mindset, it comes with an energy charge. Do I want that in my lifestyle? Not really.
Hmm.
Just because it's pet friendly doesn't mean it's dog friendly.
Interesting point.
That just me playing with words, and I'm Greek
Yeah.
and I take value on words and on the
Yeah.
meanings and deep meaning of it.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, Roman, I appreciate you being here. I don't know that I told you I was going to keep you hostage for 2 hours and 20 minutes, but you may have had other things that you needed to do. But I've enjoyed the conversation so much. Just wanted to keep things going there. Let everybody know what you do again, if they want to reach out to you, if anything you said has kind of spoken to anybody, if it's touched anybody, and they want to learn more about you, learn more about what you do, how can they reach you?
Well, you can go to my website, holisticdogtraining.org, and reach out. There is no silly question, there's no stupid question, there's no wrong question. There's always a true answer. And I'm happy to assist in any way they need help with. And if I cannot assist, I can definitely direct them in the right direction for them to get help.
Perfect. And
I
again,
help
they
them.
can find you at, you said holisticdogtraining.org. It should be somewhere in one of these corners over here. Some people should see your website there. We're going to close off here in a minute. Don't go anywhere. Stay for a minute, Roman, as I close things out. Anyway, folks, I'm glad everybody could be here. Do me a favor, if you haven't subscribed, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. If you love what I do, give me a 5-star review. I'm going to try to get back into doing a little more of the podcasts, because it's been a while since I've done a Facebook Live or really done any podcasts. But keep checking back to the Dog Training Today Facebook page. You're going to find out when I'm going to be back doing this. And have a good day, everybody. Love your dogs. Don't forget, take care of them, whether you're a guardian, whether you're a pet parent, okay? Make sure what you're doing it ethically. All right, folks, I'm out of here.